Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. Imagine you're not in your cozy bed, but instead, you're waking up in the heart of the dark ages. The air is cold, your blanket is a scratchy woolen thing that smells faintly of goat, and the only thing between you and the hard-packed earth is a straw mattress that's seen better centuries. You blink, and a sliver of gray dawn sneaks through a gap in the wooden shutters. There's a chicken on your foot. You probably won't survive this, but let's see how far you get. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're lying there, trying to convince yourself that the straw poking your back is rustic and not just a medieval version of acupuncture. The mattress is lumpy, and you're pretty sure something just scurried out from under it. You try not to think about it. The room is dark, except for the faintest glow from the dying embers in the hearth. You can see your breath in the air, and your nose is so cold it feels like it might snap off if you touch it. Welcome to your new home. A one-room hut shared with your entire family, a couple of chickens, and, if you're lucky, a goat. If you're unlucky, it's a pig. And pigs are not known for their subtlety or personal hygiene. You sit up, and the first thing you notice is the smell. It's a heady blend of damp earth, old sweat, and something you can only describe as barnyard chic. Historians still argue whether medieval people were truly nose-blind to their own stench, or if they just had no other choice. Either way, you're not used to it, and your modern nostrils are staging a full-scale rebellion. You look around and spot your family, all bundled together for warmth. Privacy is a luxury for the rich, and you are definitely not rich. The only thing separating you from your parents, siblings, and that one cousin who snores like a dragon is a thin, moth-eaten blanket. You try to stretch, but the low ceiling means you nearly smack your head on a wooden beam. The walls are made of wattle and daub, basically sticks and mud. There's a draft coming from somewhere, and you're pretty sure the wind is just as much a resident here as you are. You glance at the door, which is really just a heavy plank of wood on creaky hinges. It doesn't lock, but then again, what's there to steal? Your most valuable possession is probably the wooden spoon you keep tucked under your pillow. You know, for emergencies. You shuffle to the edge of your mattress, careful not to step on the chicken again. The floor is dirt. Actual dirt, not the distressed wood you see in trendy cafes. It's cold, uneven, and, in some places, suspiciously damp. You wonder if it rained last night, or if someone just missed the chamber pot. Speaking of which, you spot the chamber pot in the corner. It's full. You make a mental note to avoid that area until someone else deals with it. Maybe it'll be your little brother. He's always up for a challenge. You reach for your clothes, which are neatly folded, or as neatly as you can manage, on a wooden stool. They're the same clothes you wore yesterday, and the day before that, and probably the day before that, too. Laundry day is a rare event, usually reserved for when your clothes can stand up on their own. You pull on your tunic, which is made of rough wool and feels like wearing a sweater knitted by someone who hates you. Your hose, basically medieval, leggings, are patched in more places than you can count. You slip your feet into your shoes, which are really just leather sacks with laces. They're not waterproof, and you can feel every pebble through the thin soles. As you get dressed, you hear the sounds of the village waking up. Roosters crow, dogs bark, and somewhere, a baby is already crying. You can smell smoke from a neighbor's hearth and the faint aroma of something cooking, probably porridge if you're lucky. You glance out the window, which is just a hole covered with oiled cloth. Glass is for the rich, and you are, as previously established, not rich. The world outside is gray and muddy. with puddles reflecting the weak morning light. You sigh, already missing your memory foam mattress and central heating. You shuffle over to the hearth, where your mother is poking at the embers, trying to coax them back to life. She hands you a chunk of bread, which is hard enough to double as a weapon. You take a bite and immediately regret it. The bread is stale, and there's a suspicious green spot on one corner. You eat around it. Breakfast is not a leisurely affair. It's more of a survival exercise. You wash it down with a cup of ale, because the water isn't safe to drink. Historians still argue whether medieval ale was actually nutritious or just the lesser of two evils. Either way, you're not about to risk dysentery before noon. As you eat, you notice a spider crawling across the table. You flick it away, but it lands in your little brother's cup. He shrugs and drinks it anyway. Protein is protein. You try not to think about it. Your father is already outside, tending to the animals. You can hear him muttering to the cow, who seems unimpressed by his attempts at conversation. The cow is the most valuable member of your family, and she knows it. She gives you a look that says, "Don't mess this up." No pressure. You finish your breakfast and head outside, bracing yourself for the cold. The air is crisp, and your breath forms little clouds in front of your face. The village is a cluster of huts, all huddled together for warmth and protection. There's a well in the center, and a few villagers are already gathered around it, gossiping and filling buckets. You nod to them, trying to look like you belong. You don't, but they don't need to know that. You make your way to the animal pen, where the chickens are already scratching at the dirt. One of them gives you a look that says, "Feed me or else." You oblige, scattering some grain and hoping. They don't peck your toes. The pig is snuffling around, looking for something to eat. You toss him a scrap of bread, and he devours it in seconds. Pigs will eat anything, including, according to one medieval legend, the occasional unlucky villager. Historians still argue whether that's true, but you're not about to test the theory. You glance at the sky, which is a uniform shade of gray. The sun is just a rumor at this point, hiding behind thick clouds. You can hear the distant sound of church bells, calling everyone to morning prayers. Religion is the glue that holds this village together, and missing prayers is not an option. You make a mental note to show up, even if you have to drag yourself there. The last person who skipped prayers ended up cleaning the churchyard for a week. You're not about to volunteer for that. As you go about your morning chores, you can't help but notice how hard everything is. Nothing comes easy. Hauling water from the well is a full-body workout, and you're pretty sure you pulled something in your back. Feeding the animals is a test of patience and agility, especially when the goat decides to make a break for it. You chase after her, slipping in the mud and landing face first in a puddle. The villagers laugh, and you try to laugh along, but your pride is bruised, and so is your backside. You finally corral the goat and drag her back to the pen. She gives you a look that says, "Nice try." You're starting to think the animals are smarter than you. You wipe the mud from your face and try to regain some dignity. It's not easy when you're covered in dirt and goat hair. You trudge back to the hut, where your mother is already preparing for the next round of chores. There's no rest in the Dark Ages. If you're not working, you're probably in trouble. You take a moment to catch your breath, leaning against the door frame. The village is alive with activity. Children are chasing each other, their laughter echoing through the air. Women are gathering herbs, their baskets overflowing with wildflowers and weeds. Men are repairing fences, their hands rough and calloused. Everyone has a job to do, and no one is exempt. Even the old woman who lives at the edge of the village is busy, weaving baskets and muttering to herself. Some say she's a witch, but she's really just good at making soup. You watch as a group of villagers heads out to the fields, their tools slung over their shoulders. Farming is the backbone of this community, and everyone pitches in. You're expected to help too, even if you have no idea what you're doing. You grab a hoe and follow the others, trying to look confident. The field is a muddy expanse, dotted, with stunted crops and rocks. You start digging, your hands quickly blistering. The work is backbreaking, and you're already dreaming of your next meal, or at least a nap. As you toil in the field, you overhear a conversation about the local lord. He's coming to collect taxes next week, and everyone is nervous. The lord is known for his temper, and he doesn't take kindly to excuses. You make a mental note to hide your best turnips. Historians still argue whether medieval lords were truly as ruthless as the stories suggest, but you're not about to find out firsthand. You pause for a moment, wiping sweat from your brow. The sun is finally peeking through the clouds, and you can feel its warmth on your face. It's a small comfort in an otherwise challenging day. You look around and realize that, despite the hardships, there's a sense of community here. Everyone looks out for each other, even if it's just to laugh when you fall in the mud. You can't help but smile, just a little. But don't get too comfortable. The day is just beginning, and you've already survived more than most modern people could handle before breakfast. You glance at the horizon, wondering what other challenges await you. One thing's for sure, you're going to need all the luck you can get. The sun is still trying its best to break through the clouds as you trudge back to your hut for breakfast, or what passes for it in the dark ages. Remember that stale bread from this morning? Well, congratulations, it's back. Only this time, it's accompanied by a thin, watery gruel that smells vaguely of turnips and despair. You eye it with suspicion, wondering if it's worth the effort. But your stomach is growling louder than the village blacksmith, so you decide to give it a try. You take a spoonful and immediately regret your decision. The gruel is bland, gritty, and tastes like something you'd find growing in a swamp. You try to swallow it, but your throat rebels. You force it down, reminding yourself that you need the energy. Survival is a full-time job, and you can't afford to be picky. You wash it down with another cup of ale, which at least has the virtue of being slightly alcoholic. You close your eyes and pretend you're drinking a fancy craft beer. It doesn't work, but it helps a little. As you eat, you can't help but notice the flies buzzing around your head. They're everywhere, drawn to the smell of food and unwashed bodies. You swat them away, but they just keep coming back. You wonder if anyone has ever invented a fly swatter in this era. Probably not. They're too busy trying to survive to worry about minor inconveniences like swarms of insects. You sigh and resign yourself to sharing your breakfast with the local fly population. You finish your gruel and try to scrape the last bits of bread from your bowl. Your little brother is watching you with hungry eyes, hoping you'll leave something for him. You give him the last crust, and he devours it in seconds. He's like a tiny bread-eating machine. You smile, glad that you could make his day a little brighter. Even in the dark ages, small acts of kindness can make a big difference. You head outside, ready to face the day's challenges. Your mother hands you a list of chores, which seems to grow longer every day. Today's tasks include hauling water, feeding the animals, weeding the garden, and cleaning the pigsty. You groan inwardly, wondering if you'll ever have a day off. But you know better than to complain. Complaining is a luxury you can't afford. You roll up your sleeves and get to work. The first task is hauling water from the well. You grab 2 buckets and trudge over to the village center, where a group of women are already gathered, chatting and filling their own buckets. You join the line, waiting your turn. The well is deep, and the rope is rough against your hands. You lower the bucket, listening to the splash as it hits the water. You pull it back up, your muscles straining. The bucket is heavy, and you can feel the water sloshing around, threatening to spill. You carefully carry the buckets back to your hut, trying not to spill too much. The path is muddy and uneven, and you nearly trip several times. You finally make it back, your arms aching and your back screaming. You pour the water into a large wooden barrel which is already half full. You'll need to make several more trips to fill it completely. You sigh, wondering if there's a medieval version of a water pump. Probably not. The next task is feeding the animals. You grab a bucket of grain and head to the animal pen, where the chickens, the goat, and the pig are waiting impatiently. The chickens peck at your feet, demanding their share. The goat tries to headbutt you just for fun. The pig just snorts and stares at you with its beady eyes. You scatter the grain, trying to avoid getting pecked, headbutted, or snorted at. It's a delicate balancing act. You move on to the garden, which is a patch of weeds and struggling vegetables. You grab a hoe and start weeding, trying to distinguish between the plants you want to keep and the ones you want to get rid of. It's not easy. Everything looks the same to you. You accidentally pull up a carrot and you feel a pang of guilt. You try to replant it, but it's probably too late. You apologize to the carrot just in case. As you weed, you notice a strange plant growing in the corner of the garden. It has bright red berries and spiky leaves. You've never seen anything like it before. You wonder if it's poisonous. You decide not to touch it, just in case. You make a mental note to ask the old woman at the edge of the village about it. She knows everything about plants, even the ones that can kill you. The final task is cleaning the pigsty. You grab a shovel and head to the pig pen, bracing yourself for the stench. The pigsty is a muddy, smelly mess. The pig is wallowing in the muck, looking perfectly content. You start shoveling, trying not to breathe too deeply. The smell is overwhelming, and you feel like you're going to gag. You wonder if this is what hell smells like. You work as quickly as you can, trying to get the job done before you pass out. The pig watches you with amusement, occasionally grunting as if to say, "Is that all you've got?" You ignore him and keep shoveling. You finally finish, your clothes covered in mud and your stomach churning. You dump the last shovelful of muck into a nearby pile and collapse against the fence, gasping for air. You're exhausted, but you're not done yet. There are still more chores to do, and the day is only half over. You trudge back to your hut, wondering if you'll ever get used to this life. You miss your modern conveniences, like running water, electricity, and indoor plumbing. You miss your comfortable bed, your clean clothes, and your endless supply of snacks. You miss your phone, your computer, and your Netflix account. You miss everything about your old life. But you can't dwell on the past. You have to focus on the present, on surviving this day. You take a deep breath and remind yourself that you're stronger than you think. You've already made it this far, and you're not about to give up now. You're a survivor, even if you don't feel like one. You're a medieval warrior, fighting against the odds. You're really tired and covered in pig poop, but you're still standing. You enter your hut, where your mother is preparing lunch. It's another bowl of gruel, but this time it's flavored with onions. You try to look enthusiastic, but your face betrays you. Your mother smiles sympathetically. She knows how hard this life is, but she also knows that it's the only life you have. She hands you a spoon and says, "Eat. You need your strength." You eat your gruel, trying to appreciate the subtle onion flavor. It's not gourmet cuisine, but it's food. And in the Dark Ages, food is a precious commodity. You finish your meal and thank your mother. She nods and says, "There's more work to be done." You sigh and head back outside, ready to face whatever challenges the afternoon may bring. As you walk through the village, you notice a group of children playing in the mud. They're laughing and splashing, completely oblivious to the hardships of life. You watch them for a moment, feeling a pang of envy. They don't know how lucky they are. They haven't experienced the modern world, with all its comforts and conveniences. They don't know what they're missing. But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe ignorance is bliss. Maybe it's better to be happy in the moment, even if you don't have everything you want. You smile and wave to the children, and they wave back. You feel a sense of connection, A sense of belonging. You're part of this community, even if you're just a temporary visitor. You're sharing their struggles, their joys, and their hopes, and that's something special. You continue your chores, feeling a little lighter, a little more optimistic. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, and the pigsty is finally clean. You're still tired, you're still dirty, and you're still missing your Netflix account. But you're alive. And in the dark ages, that's a victory in itself. You're still chewing on the last stringy bit of onion from your lunch gruel when you realize it's time to get properly dressed for the day. Not that you weren't already wearing clothes, but in the dark ages, getting dressed is a whole ordeal. You glance at your tunic, which is now sporting a fresh mud streak courtesy of the pigsty, and sigh. There's no such thing as a wardrobe change here, unless you count turning your tunic inside out and pretending it's new. You shuffle over to the corner where your family keeps their precious stash of clothing. It's not much. A couple of tunics, some hose, a battered cloak, and a pair of shoes that look like they've survived a few plagues. You pick up your hose, which are basically medieval leggings, and try to ignore the fact that they're still damp from yesterday's rain. You wriggle into them, feeling every scratchy fiber of the coarse wool. If you've ever wondered what it's like to wear a sweater on your legs, this is it, except itchier, and with a faint aroma of sheep. Next comes the tunic, which is a simple knee-length garment made of the same rough wool. You pull it over your head, wincing as it snags on your hair. There's no tag at the collar, but if there were, it would probably say, "One size fits none." You try to smooth it down, but it's hopeless. The fabric is stiff, the seams are uneven, and there's a mysterious stain near the hem that you decide not to investigate. Historians still argue whether medieval people cared about fashion, or just wore whatever kept them from freezing. Judging by your current outfit, you're guessing it's the latter. You reach for your shoes, which are more like leather slippers with laces. They're thin, worn, and offer about as much support as a wet noodle. You slip them on, feeling every pebble, and twig through the soles. You tie the laces, which are frayed and threatening to snap at any moment. You make a mental note to avoid running, jumping, or doing anything remotely athletic today. Not that you were planning to, but still. Now comes the real challenge: underwear, or more accurately, the lack thereof. In the dark ages, underwear is a luxury reserved for the wealthy. If you're lucky, you might have a linen shirt to wear under your tunic, but that's about it. You glance at your family's laundry pile and spot a single threadbare linen shift. It's your mother's, and she guards it like a dragon hoarding treasure. You decide to go without. It's not like anyone's going to notice, and besides, everyone else is in the same boat. You try not to think about it as you adjust your tunic and hope for the best. You throw on your cloak, which is little more than a rectangle of wool with a hole for your head. It's heavy, scratchy, and smells faintly of smoke. You fasten it with a wooden brooch, which is more decorative than functional. The cloak drags on the ground, picking up mud and leaves as you walk. You try to hitch it up, but it just slides back down. You resign yourself to looking like a walking haystack. As you step outside, you catch a glimpse of your reflection in a puddle. You look medieval. There's no other word for it. Your hair is a mess, your clothes are wrinkled, and your shoes are caked in mud. You try to imagine what your friends back home would say if they could see you now. Probably something like, "Nice cosplay," or, "Is that a new TikTok trend?" You chuckle to yourself, then remember that TikTok won't be invented for another 1,000 years. You sigh and trudge on. You make your way through the village, passing neighbors who are similarly dressed in various shades of brown and gray. Colorful clothing is rare, reserved for the nobility or special occasions. Most people wear whatever fabric they can get their hands on, usually wool or linen. Dyes are expensive, and bright colors fade quickly. You spot the local blacksmith, who's wearing a tunic so stained with soot it's practically black. He gives you a nod, and you nod back, feeling a sense of camaraderie. You're all in this together, united by your shared struggle against the elements and fashion. You pass by a group of children playing in the mud, their clothes even dirtier than yours. One of them is wearing a tunic that's clearly been handed down through several siblings, judging by the patches and mismatched sleeves. Another is barefoot, her feet caked in mud. You wonder if she even owns shoes. Probably not. Shoes are expensive, and most people go without unless it's absolutely necessary. You make a mental note to be grateful for your flimsy leather slippers, even if they do let in every drop of water. You spot the village priest, who's wearing a slightly nicer tunic and a heavy woolen cloak. He's the best-dressed person in the village, which isn't saying much. He gives you a stern look, as if to remind you that vanity is a sin. You nod respectfully and keep walking, trying not to trip over your cloak. As you walk, you notice a group of women gathered around a large wooden tub, washing clothes in the icy water. They're scrubbing furiously, their hands red and raw. Laundry day is a communal event, and everyone pitches in. The women gossip as they work, sharing news and rumors. You overhear a story about a traveling merchant who was robbed on the road, and another about a woman who claims to have seen a fairy in the woods. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly believed in fairies, or if it was just a way to explain the unexplainable. Either way, you make a mental note to avoid the woods after dark. You watch as the women wring out the clothes and hang them on a line to dry. The wind whips through the village, sending the clothes flapping like flags. You wonder how long it will take for your tunic to dry if it ever gets washed. Probably a few days if you're lucky. You shiver and pull your cloak tighter around you. You head back to your hut, where your mother is mending a hole in your father's tunic. She's using a needle and thread, her fingers moving quickly and skillfully. Mending clothes is a never-ending task, and everyone is expected to help. You sit down next to her and offer to help, but she just smiles and shakes her head. "You'll only make it worse," she says, and you can't argue with that. You watch as she patches the tunic, her stitches neat and even. She tells you stories, as she works, stories about her own childhood, about the village, about the world beyond. You listen, fascinated by her tales of knights and dragons, of kings and queens, of distant lands and ancient mysteries. You realize that clothing is more than just protection from the elements. It's a connection to the past, a link to your ancestors, a symbol of your place in the world. You glance at your own clothes, patched and worn, and feel a sense of pride. You may not be rich, but you're resourceful. You make do with what you have, and you make it work. You're a survivor, just like your mother, just like your ancestors. You may not look like much, but you're tougher than you seem. You finish helping your mother and head outside again, ready to face the rest of the day. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, and your cloak is only slightly damp. You take a deep breath and smile, feeling a sense of accomplishment. You may not have the latest fashion, but you have something better: resilience. As you walk through the village, you spot a group of men preparing for a hunt. They're dressed in leather and fur, their boots sturdy and well-worn. They carry bows and arrows, their faces set with determination. Hunting is a dangerous business, but it's also a necessity. The village depends on the hunters for meat, hides, and bones. You watch as they set off into the woods, their dogs barking excitedly. You wonder if you'll ever be brave enough to join them. You continue your walk, passing by the village healer's hut. She's an old woman with wild hair and a collection of strange herbs hanging from the rafters. She's wearing a cloak made of patchwork fabric, each piece a different color and texture. She gives you a toothless grin and waves you over. You hesitate, but curiosity gets the better of you. You step inside her hut, which smells of smoke and herbs. She offers you a cup of tea, which tastes bitter but oddly comforting. She tells you stories about the old days, about the magic of plants, about the power of nature. She shows you a bundle of nettles, which she uses to make a tonic for sore muscles. She laughs and says, "It stings, but it works." You thank her and leave, feeling a little wiser and a little itchier. You head back to your hut, ready to face whatever the rest of the day brings. You may not have the comforts of modern life, but you have something just as valuable: the strength to endure, the courage to adapt, and the wisdom to appreciate the little things. Like a warm cloak on a cold day, or a cup of tea with a friend, you settle in for the evening, your clothes scratchy but warm, your heart full of gratitude. You may not last 24 hours in the dark ages, but you're giving it your best shot. And that's all anyone can ask. With your scratchy woolens clinging to your skin, you're now officially ready to tackle the medieval chore gauntlet. Forget your morning yoga or a leisurely jog. In the dark ages, your daily workout is dictated by the needs of the village. And trust me, the village is needy. You step out of your hut, take a deep breath of that fresh, unadulterated, and slightly manure-tinged air, and brace yourself. Your first task is hauling water. Again, it seems like you're always hauling water. The well is the social hub of the village, a place where women gather to gossip, exchange news, and complain about their husbands. You join the line, trying to look like you're enjoying yourself. You're not. Your arms are already aching from this morning's water hauling session, and you're pretty sure you're developing a permanent stoop. You lower the bucket into the well, listening to the familiar splash as it hits the water. You pull it back up, your muscles screaming in protest. The bucket is heavy, and you can feel the water sloshing around, threatening to spill. You carefully carry the buckets back to your hut, trying not to spill too much. The path is even muddier than it was this morning, thanks to a passing herd of goats. You slip and nearly fall, but you manage to regain your balance. You curse the goats under your breath. You pour the water into the barrel, which is still only half full. You'll need to make several more trips to fill it completely. You sigh, wondering if there's a medieval version of a gym membership. Probably not. Your entire life is a gym membership, whether you like it or not. You head back to the well, ready for another round. As you wait in line, you overhear a conversation about the upcoming Harvest Festival. It's a big event, a chance for the village to celebrate the bounty of the land and give thanks to the gods, or God, depending on your village's religious leanings. There will be feasting, dancing, and games. You're looking forward to it, even if it means more chores in the meantime. You finally reach the front of the line and lower your bucket into the well. You pull it back up, your arms feeling like they're about to fall off. You carry the buckets back to your hut, trying to ignore the pain. You pour the water into the barrel, which is now 3/4 full. You're almost there. You head back to the well for the final time. You lower your bucket, pull it up, and carry it back to your hut. You pour the water into the barrel, which is now overflowing. You've done it. You've hauled enough water to last the village for at least a few hours. You collapse against the barrel, gasping for air. You're exhausted, but you're also proud of yourself. You've accomplished something. You've contributed to the community. You're a water hauling champion. Your next task is feeding the animals. You grab a bucket of grain and head to the animal pen, where the chickens, the goat, and the pig are waiting impatiently. The chickens peck at your feet, demanding their share. The goat tries to headbutt you just for fun. The pig just snorts and stares at you with its beady eyes. You scatter the grain, trying to avoid getting pecked, headbutted, or snorted at. It's still a delicate balancing act. You move on to the garden, which is even weedier than it was this morning. You grab a hoe and start weeding, trying to distinguish between the plants you want to keep and the ones you want to get rid of. It's still not easy. You accidentally pull up another carrot, and you feel even more guilty than before. You apologize to the carrot, promising to be more careful next time. As you weed, you notice that the strange plant with the red berries is even bigger than it was this morning. You're starting to get worried. You decide to ask the old woman at the edge of the village about it as soon as possible. You don't want anyone to get poisoned. The next task is cleaning the pigsty. Again, it seems like you're always cleaning the pigsty. You grab a shovel and head to the pig pen, bracing yourself for the stench. The pigsty is even muddier and smellier than it was this morning. The pig is wallowing in the muck, looking perfectly content. You start shoveling, trying not to breathe too deeply. The smell is even more overwhelming than before, and you feel like you're going to pass out. You work as quickly as you can, trying to get the job done before you lose consciousness. The pig watches you with amusement, occasionally grunting, as if to say, "You call that shoveling?" You ignore him and keep shoveling. You finally finish, your clothes covered in mud and your stomach churning. You dump the last shovelful of muck into a nearby pile and collapse against the fence, gasping for air. You're beyond exhausted, but you're still not done. There are still more chores to do, and the day is only getting harder. You trudge back to your hut, wondering if you'll ever have a moment to rest. You miss your modern conveniences, like dishwashers, washing machines, and vacuum cleaners. You miss your comfortable couch, your big screen TV, and your endless supply of snacks. You miss everything about your old life, but you can't dwell on the past. You have to focus on the present, on surviving this day. You take a deep breath and remind yourself that you're stronger than you think. You've already made it this far, and you're not about to give up now. You're a chore-conquering champion. You enter your hut where your mother is preparing dinner. It's another bowl of gruel, but this time it's flavored with cabbage. You try to look enthusiastic, but your face betrays you. Your mother smiles sympathetically. She knows how hard this life is, but she also knows that it's the only life you have. She hands you a spoon and says, "Eat. You need your strength." You eat your gruel, trying to appreciate the subtle cabbage flavor. It's not a Michelin star meal, but it's food. And in the Dark Ages, food is a precious commodity. You finish your meal and thank your mother. She nods and says, "There's still more work to be done." You sigh and head back outside, ready to face whatever challenges the evening may bring. As you walk through the village, you notice a group of men practicing with swords and shields. They're training for battle, preparing to defend the village from invaders. War is a constant threat in the Dark Ages, and everyone is expected to be ready to fight. You watch them for a moment, feeling a pang of fear. You're not a warrior, but you're willing to do whatever it takes to protect your home. You continue your chores, feeling a little more determined, a little more courageous. The sun is setting, casting long shadows across the village. The air is getting colder, and you can feel the chill in your bones. You know that the night will be long and hard, but you're ready for it. You're a survivor, and you're not going anywhere. You finish your chores and head back to your hut, where your family is waiting for you. You gather around the fire, sharing stories and laughter. You may not have much, but you have each other, and that's enough. As you settle in for the night, you can't help but feel a sense of gratitude. You've survived another day in the Dark Ages, and you're one step closer to making it through this crazy experiment. You close your eyes and drift off to sleep, dreaming of running water, clean clothes, and a world without pigsties. Okay, let's talk hygiene, or more accurately, the distinct lack thereof. After a day spent hauling water, shoveling manure, and dodging livestock, you're probably feeling a little ripe. You glance down at your tunic, which is now sporting a delightful collage of mud, sweat, and questionable stains, and sigh. You're starting to understand why medieval art rarely features close-ups. You decide it's time to clean up, or at least attempt to. The first challenge is finding soap. In the Dark Ages, soap is a luxury item, reserved for the wealthy, or those with a particularly strong aversion to smelling like a barnyard. You ask your mother if there's any soap to be had, and she gives you a look that says, Are you kidding? She points to a small, greasy lump in the corner, which she identifies as soap adjacent. You eye it with suspicion, wondering what it's made of. Probably rendered animal fat and wood ash, if you had to guess. You decide to proceed with caution. You grab a bucket and head to the well, where you fill it with cold, murky water. You carry it back to your hut, trying not to spill too much. You find a quiet corner and start to wash, using the soap-adjacent lump sparingly. It doesn't lather, and it smells vaguely of bacon, but it's better than nothing. You scrub your face, your hands, and any other exposed skin, trying to remove the worst of the grime. As you wash, you can't help but notice the lack of privacy. Your family is all crammed into the same small space, and they're watching you with amusement. You try to ignore them, but it's hard when your little brother is making pig noises and your father is offering unsolicited advice on your scrubbing technique. You hurry through your wash, eager to escape the scrutiny. You rinse off with more cold water, shivering as the icy liquid runs down your back. You dry yourself with a rough linen cloth, which feels like sandpaper against your skin. You're still dirty, but you're slightly less dirty than you were before. You decide to call it a win. Now comes the real challenge: bathing. In the Dark Ages, baths are rare events, usually reserved for special occasions or when you're so filthy that people start avoiding you. You ask your mother when the last time you had a bath was, and she shrugs. "Sometime last summer, maybe?" she says. You groan inwardly. You're pretty sure you've developed a whole new ecosystem on your skin since then. You ask if there's any chance of a bath today, and your mother laughs. "Are you crazy?" she says. "We don't have enough water to waste on a bath." You try to argue, but she's adamant. Baths are a luxury, and you're not about to get one. You sigh and resign yourself to another day of grime and sweat. You decide to focus on your hair, which is greasy and tangled. You try to comb it, but the comb gets stuck in a knot. You pull harder, and the knot tightens. You pull even harder, and a chunk of hair comes out. You wince and throw the comb aside. You're starting to think that a medieval haircut involves a pair of shears and a blindfold. You try to wash your hair with the soap-adjacent lump, but it doesn't work. Your hair just gets greasier and more tangled. You rinse it with cold water, but it's still a mess. You decide to give up and tie it back with a piece of string. You'll deal with it later, maybe. You glance at your teeth, which are probably covered in plaque and tartar. You ask your mother if there's any way to clean them, and she hands you a twig. "Chew on this," she says. "It'll help." You eye the twig with suspicion, wondering what kind of tree it came from. Probably something poisonous if you had to guess. You chew on it anyway, trying to ignore the bitter taste. As you chew, you can't help but think about modern dental hygiene. You miss your toothbrush, your toothpaste, and your dentist. You miss the feeling of clean, smooth teeth. You make a mental note to brush your teeth for at least 5 minutes. When you get back home, you finish chewing on the twig and spit it out. Your teeth still feel dirty, but they're slightly less dirty than they were before. You decide to call it another win. Now comes the really unpleasant part: the toilet. In the Dark Ages, toilets are communal pits located on the outskirts of the village. They're smelly, unsanitary, and offer absolutely no privacy. You try to avoid them as much as possible, but sometimes you have no choice. You grab a handful of leaves and head to the communal pit, bracing yourself for the stench. The pit is even more disgusting than you remember. It's overflowing with waste, and the flies are buzzing around in swarms. You try to hold your breath, but it's impossible. You quickly do your business, wipe yourself with the leaves, and run back to your hut gagging. You wash your hands with more cold water, trying to get rid of the smell. You're starting to think that the Dark Ages are one giant hygiene nightmare. You miss your modern bathroom, with its running water, flush toilet, and endless supply of toilet paper. You make a mental note to appreciate every single one of those things when you get back home, You glance at your clothes, which are now even dirtier than they were before. You're starting to feel like a walking biohazard. You ask your mother if there's any chance of washing your clothes, and she laughs. "Are you kidding?" she says. "We don't have enough water to waste on washing clothes." You try to argue, but she's adamant. Laundry is a luxury, and you're not about to get any. You sigh and resign yourself to another day of wearing dirty clothes. You decide to focus on the positive. You may be dirty, smelly, and covered in grime, but you're alive. And in the dark ages, that's a victory in itself. You take a deep breath and remind yourself that you're stronger than you think. You've already made it this far, and you're not about to give up now. You're a hygiene-challenged champion. You head outside, ready to face whatever challenges the afternoon may bring. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, and the village is bustling with activity. You try to ignore the smell and focus on the beauty of the world around you. You're determined to make the best of this experience, even if it means enduring a few more hygiene horrors. As you walk through the village, you spot a group of children playing in the mud. They're laughing and splashing, completely oblivious to the dirt and grime. You watch them for a moment, feeling a pang of envy. They don't know how lucky they are. They haven't experienced the modern world, with all its clean, sanitized surfaces. They don't know what they're missing, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe ignorance is bliss. Maybe it's better to be happy in the moment, even if you're covered in pig poop. You smile and wave to the children, and they wave back. You feel a sense of connection, a sense of belonging. You're part of this community, even if you're just a temporary visitor. You're sharing their struggles, their joys, and their smells. You continue your walk, feeling a little more resilient, a little more determined. You may not be clean, but you're strong. You may not be comfortable, but you're adaptable. You may not be happy, but you're trying. And in the dark ages, that's all that matters. Now that you're as clean as you're likely to get in this era, which, let's be honest, isn't saying much, it's time to brave the medieval marketplace. Imagine a modern-day farmer's market, but swap the organic kale and artisanal cheeses for questionable meats, overripe vegetables, and the ever-present aroma of livestock. Oh, and add a healthy dose of mud, pickpockets, and the occasional runaway animal. Welcome to your shopping experience. You grab your meager purse, which contains a few copper coins and a small knife for self-defense, or, more likely, for haggling, and head towards the center of the village. The marketplace is already bustling, with activity, vendors hawking their wares, customers haggling over prices, and children running wild through the crowds. You try to navigate the chaos, dodging carts, livestock, and the occasional pile of something. The first thing you notice is the smell. It's a potent mix of unwashed bodies, rotting food, and animal waste. You try to breathe through your mouth, but it's no use. The stench is inescapable. You wonder if anyone has ever invented a nose plug in this era. Probably not. They're too busy trying to survive to worry about minor inconveniences like olfactory assault. You make your way to the vegetable stall where a gruff-looking woman is selling a variety of root vegetables. You eye the turnips, the carrots, and the onions, trying to decide what to buy. Everything looks slightly wilted and covered in dirt, but you're hungry and you need to eat something other than gruel. You decide to go with the onions, which seem the least offensive. You ask the vendor how much the onions cost, and she quotes you a price that seems exorbitant. You try to haggle, but she's not budging. She's clearly seen your modern clothes and pegged you as an easy mark. You try to explain that you're just a poor villager trying to make a living, but she just laughs. "Everyone's a poor villager," she says. "Now pay up or move on." You sigh and hand over the coins, feeling like you've been robbed. You grab a handful of onions and stuff them into your bag. You're starting to understand why medieval people were so grumpy. It's hard to be cheerful when you're constantly being ripped off. You move on to the meat stall, where a burly man is selling a variety of meats. You use the term meat loosely, as you're not entirely sure what kind of animals these things came from. There's a slab of something that looks vaguely like beef, a string of sausages that are probably made of pork, and a pile of something else that you don't even want to think about. You ask the vendor what kind of meat he's selling, and he gives you a shrug. "Meat is meat," he says. "What does it matter?" You try to press him for details, but he just glares at you. You decide not to push it. You're not sure you want to know what you're eating. You buy a sausage, which is greasy and smells vaguely of garlic. You take a bite, and it tastes interesting. You're not sure what kind of spices are in it, but they're definitely not the kind you're used to. You swallow it down, trying not to gag. You're starting to think that vegetarianism is a perfectly reasonable lifestyle choice in this era. You move on to the bread stall, where a kindly-looking woman is selling loaves of bread. The bread looks slightly less stale than the bread you had for breakfast, so you decide to buy a loaf. You ask the vendor how much the bread costs, and she quotes you a price that seems reasonable. You hand over the coins and grab a loaf of bread. As you walk away, you notice a group of children eyeing your bread with hungry eyes. You feel a pang of guilt. You know that many families in the village are struggling to feed themselves, and you have more than enough bread for one person. You decide to share your bread with the children. You break off a piece of bread and hand it to one of the children. He takes it eagerly and devours it in seconds. You break off another piece and hand it to another child. Soon, you've given away half of your loaf of bread. The children are smiling and laughing, and you feel a sense of satisfaction. You may not have much, but you can still make a difference in someone's life. You continue your shopping, trying to find a few other essentials. You need some candles for light, some herbs for flavor, and some wool for mending your clothes. You haggle with the vendors, trying to get the best prices. You're starting to get the hang of it. You're becoming a medieval bargain hunter. As you walk through the marketplace, you have to be careful to avoid pickpockets. The marketplace is a haven for thieves, and they're always on the lookout for unsuspecting victims. You keep your hand on your purse, making sure that no one tries to steal it. You also try to avoid eye contact with anyone who looks suspicious. You're almost finished with your shopping when you see a commotion in the distance. A pig has escaped from its pen and is running wild through the marketplace, knocking over stalls and scattering people in its wake. You try to get out of the way, but it's too late. The pig barrels into you, knocking you to the ground. You land in a pile of mud, your clothes covered in filth. The pig runs off, squealing with delight. You lie there for a moment, stunned and humiliated. You're starting to think that the Dark Ages are conspiring against you. You get up, brush yourself off, and try to salvage what's left of your dignity. You're covered in mud, your clothes are torn, and your onions are scattered all over the ground. You sigh and start picking up the onions, one by one. You're starting to wonder if this whole medieval experiment is worth it. You finish your shopping and head back to your hut, feeling defeated and discouraged. You're starting to realize that surviving in the Dark Ages is not as romantic as it sounds. It's hard, it's dirty, and it's often humiliating. But you're not ready to give up yet. You're a survivor, and you're determined to make it through this experience, no matter how unpleasant it may be. You enter your hut, where your family is waiting for you. They take one look at you and burst out laughing. You try to laugh along, but you're not really in the mood. You're starting to think that you need a vacation. So you've survived the marketplace, albeit with a mud-caked tunic and a bruised ego. But the Dark Ages have more perils in store than just unruly livestock and overpriced onions. Let's talk about medieval medicine, or more accurately, the terrifying absence thereof. Imagine a world where your doctor's bag contains leeches, a rusty saw, and a healthy dose of superstition. Feeling queasy yet, let's say, for the sake of argument, that you've stubbed your toe. Sounds minor, right? In the 21st century, you'd slap on a Band-Aid, pop an ibuprofen, and be on your way. But in the Dark Ages, a stubbed toe could be a death sentence. You see, even the smallest wound can become infected in this era, thanks to the lack of sanitation and the abundance of bacteria. You limp back to your hut, clutching your throbbing toe. Your mother takes one look at it and grimaces. "That looks nasty," she says. "We need to get the healer." You groan inwardly. The village healer is an old woman named Agnes, who lives at the edge of the woods and has a reputation for being eccentric. Some say she's a witch, others say she's just crazy. Either way, you're not thrilled about the prospect of being treated by her. Your mother helps you hobble to Agnes's hut, which is even more dilapidated than your own. The hut is filled with strange herbs, dried animal parts, and jars of mysterious liquids. The air is thick with the smell of smoke and decay. You try not to breathe too deeply. Agnes greets you with a toothless grin. "What's this then?" she cackles, peering at your toe. "A little boo-boo?" You explain that you stubbed your toe and it's been hurting ever since. Agnes nods sagely. "I see," she says. "A clear case of the evil eye." You raise an eyebrow. "The evil eye? Really?" Agnes tells you to sit down on a stool which is covered in cat hair. She examines your toe, poking and prodding it with her gnarled fingers. You wince in pain. She says. "It's definitely infected. We need to draw out the bad blood." You gulp. "Bad blood? What is this, a vampire movie?" Agnes reaches for a jar of leeches, which are wriggling around inside. You stare at them in horror. "Leeches? Are you serious?" Agnes explains that leeches are a traditional remedy for drawing out infections. They suck out the bad blood, leaving the good blood behind. You're not convinced. Agnes applies the leeches to your toe, and they immediately start sucking. You feel a sharp pain, followed by a strange tingling sensation. You try not to look at the leeches, but it's impossible. They're right there, feasting on your blood. You feel like you're going to pass out. After what seems like an eternity, Agnes removes the leeches. Your toe is now covered in blood, and you feel even weaker than before. Agnes bandages your toe with a piece of dirty cloth. "That should do the trick," she says. "Come back in a few days and we'll see how it's healing." You thank Agnes and hobble back to your hut, feeling like you've just been through a medieval torture session. You're not sure if the leeches helped or made things worse, but you're definitely not feeling any better. You lie down on your straw mattress and try to rest. As you lie there, you can't help but think about modern medicine. You miss antibiotics, antiseptics, and pain relievers. You miss doctors who have actual medical training, not just a collection of superstitions and folk remedies. You make a mental note to appreciate every single one of those things when you get back home. You drift off to sleep, dreaming of leeches, rusty saws, and the evil eye. You wake up a few hours later feeling even worse than before. Your toe is throbbing, and you have a fever. You're starting to think that Agnes's treatment was a complete failure. Your mother checks your temperature by placing her hand on your forehead. "You're burning up," she says. "We need to try something else." You groan. "What else is there? More leeches? A rusty saw?" Your mother decides to try a poultice, which is a mixture of herbs and other ingredients that are applied to the skin. She gathers a variety of plants from the garden, including comfrey, plantain, and chamomile. She mixes them together with some lard and applies the mixture to your toe. The poultice feels cool and soothing, and you start to feel a little better. You lie back and try to relax. You're not sure if the poultice is actually working or if it's just a placebo effect, but you're willing to try anything at this point. You drift off to sleep again, dreaming of modern hospitals, clean bandages, and doctors who know what they're doing. You wake up the next morning feeling slightly better. Your fever has gone down, and your toe is throbbing less. You're starting to think that the poultice might actually be working. You continue to apply the poultice for the next few days, and your toe gradually starts to heal. The infection clears up, and the pain subsides. You're starting to feel like yourself again. You thank your mother for her help, and she smiles. "See?" she says. "Sometimes the old ways are the best. You're not entirely convinced, but you're grateful to be alive. You've survived a medieval medical crisis, and you're one step closer to making it through this crazy experiment. You make a mental note to be extra careful in the future and to avoid stubbing your toes at all costs. As you recover, you can't help but think about the countless people who died from simple infections in the Dark Ages. You realize how lucky you are to live in a time when medicine is advanced and readily available. You make a mental note to appreciate every single one of those things when you get back home. You also realize that medieval healers weren't entirely useless. They may not have had the knowledge and technology of modern doctors, but they did their best with what they had. They used herbs, poultices, and other natural remedies to treat illnesses and injuries. And sometimes they even succeeded. You're starting to develop a grudging respect for Agnes, the village healer. She may be eccentric, but she's also resourceful and dedicated. She cares about her community, and she does everything she can to help them. You're not sure if you'd trust her with a serious illness, but you're grateful for her help with your stubbed toe. You're also starting to appreciate the importance of superstition in medieval medicine. In a world where science is limited and knowledge is scarce, people often turn to superstition for comfort and guidance. They believe that certain objects, rituals, and prayers can ward off evil spirits and promote healing. You may not believe in the evil eye, but you can understand why people did in the Dark Ages. You're starting to see the Dark Ages in a new light. It's not just a time of ignorance and barbarism. It's also a time of resilience, resourcefulness, and community. People may not have had the comforts of modern life, but they had each other. And sometimes, that's all that matters. Okay, you've survived a near-death experience with medieval medicine. Now it's time to talk about law and order, or more accurately, the often brutal and arbitrary systems that passed for justice in the Dark Ages. Forget your due process and your Miranda rights. In this era, you're at the mercy of the local lord, the village elders, and the ever-present threat of mob rule. And public humiliation is always on the menu. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that you've been accused of stealing a loaf of bread. Sounds minor, right? But in the Dark Ages, theft is a serious crime, especially when food is scarce. You're hauled before the village elders, who are gathered in the town square, looking grim and judgmental. The elders question you about the theft, and you protest your innocence. You explain that you were hungry and desperate, but you didn't steal the bread. You found it lying on the ground, and you assumed it was abandoned. The elders listen to your story, but they don't seem convinced. The village baker, a burly man with flour-dusted clothes, steps forward and accuses you of lying. He claims that he saw you steal the bread from his stall. You deny it, but it's your word against his. And he's a respected member of the community, while you're just a newcomer. The elders deliberate for a few minutes, then announce their verdict. You're found guilty of theft. You're shocked and dismayed. You didn't steal the bread, but you're being punished anyway. You're starting to realize that justice in the Dark Ages is not always fair. The elders sentence you to a day in the stocks, which are wooden frames that lock your hands and feet in place. You're led to the town square, where the stocks are set up in front of the crowd. You're forced to sit in the stocks, exposed to the elements and the ridicule of the villagers. The villagers gather around, jeering and taunting you. Some of them throw rotten vegetables at you. Others spit on you. You try to ignore them, but it's hard when you're being publicly humiliated. You're starting to feel like you're in a medieval version of reality TV. As you sit in the stocks, you can't help but think about modern justice systems. You miss your right to a fair trial. your right to legal representation, and your right to appeal a guilty verdict. You make a mental note to appreciate every single one of those things when you get back home. You also realize that public humiliation is a cruel and unusual punishment. It's designed to shame and degrade you, to strip you of your dignity. You're starting to understand why medieval people were so afraid of being accused of crimes. The punishment was often worse than the crime itself. You spend the day in the stocks, enduring the taunts and the rotten vegetables. You're hungry, thirsty, and miserable. You're starting to think that you'd rather be cleaning the pigsty than sitting in the stocks. As the sun begins to set, the elders release you from the stocks. You're stiff, sore, and covered in filth. You stumble back to your hut, feeling like you've been through a medieval hazing ritual. You're not sure if you'll ever be able to show your face in the village again. You enter your hut, where your family is waiting for you. They're sympathetic, but they're also worried. They know that being branded as a thief can have serious consequences in the Dark Ages. You could be ostracized, shunned, or even exiled from the village. Your mother offers you some food and water, and you gratefully accept. You eat in silence, trying to process what just happened. You're starting to realize that surviving in the Dark Ages is not just about enduring physical hardships. It's also about navigating the complex social and political landscape. You spend the night in your hut, feeling anxious and uncertain. You're not sure what the future holds, but you know that you need to be careful. You can't afford to make any more mistakes. You're starting to think that you need a new strategy for surviving in the Dark Ages. The next morning, you wake up to find a group of villagers gathered outside your hut. They're carrying torches and pitchforks, and they look angry. You're terrified. What do they want? Are they going to attack you? The village leader steps forward and addresses you. He explains that the villagers are concerned about your presence in the community. They're afraid that you're a troublemaker, a thief, or even a witch. They demand that you leave the village immediately. You're shocked and dismayed. You didn't steal the bread, and you're not a witch. You're just a time traveler trying to survive in the Dark Ages. But you can't explain that to the villagers. They wouldn't understand. You realize that you have no choice. You have to leave the village. You pack your meager belongings and say goodbye to your family. You're sad to leave them, but you know that it's for the best. You can't stay in a place where you're not wanted. You leave the village and head into the woods, feeling lost and alone. You're not sure where you're going, but you know that you need to find a new place to live. You're starting to think that surviving in the Dark Ages is impossible. As you wander through the woods, you can't help but think about the countless people who were wrongly accused and punished in the Dark Ages. You realize how lucky you are to live in a time when justice is, at least in theory, fair and impartial. You make a mental note to appreciate every single one of those things when you get back home. You also realize that the threat of being accused of witchcraft was a constant source of fear and anxiety in the Dark Ages. Anyone could be accused of witchcraft, regardless of their gender, age, or social status, and the consequences of being found guilty were often fatal. You're starting to understand why medieval people were so superstitious. They believed that witches and demons were real, and that they could cause harm to people and communities. They used charms, spells, and other rituals to protect themselves from evil. You may not believe in witchcraft, but you can understand why people did in the Dark Ages. You're starting to see the Dark Ages in a new light. It's not just a time of ignorance and barbarism. It's also a time of fear, paranoia, and injustice. People were constantly living in fear of being accused of crimes, being punished for things they didn't do, and being persecuted for their beliefs. You're grateful to be living in a time when justice is, at least in theory, more enlightened. So, you've been unjustly accused, publicly humiliated, and exiled from the village. Things are going great. But don't worry, there's more to the Dark Ages than just brutal justice systems and suspicious villagers. There's also religion and In this era, religion isn't just a Sunday morning activity, it's a way of life. It dictates your schedule, your beliefs, and even your social standing. Get ready to be swept up in a world where the church bells are always ringing, and missing Mass could land you in serious trouble. As you wander through the woods, feeling lost and alone, you hear the distant sound of church bells. You're not sure where they're coming from, but you decide to follow them. You're hoping to find a new village, a new community, a new place to call home. You walk for several hours, following the sound of the bells. Finally, you come to a clearing, and you see a small village in the distance. The village is centered around a large church, which dominates the landscape. You're relieved to have found a new place to live, but you're also apprehensive. You know that you need to be careful. You can't afford to make any more mistakes. You approach the village cautiously, trying to look as harmless as possible. You're greeted by a group of villagers who are curious about your presence. They ask you who you are, where you're from, and what you're doing in their village. You explain that you're a traveler, that you're looking for a new place to live, and that you're a devout Christian. You emphasize your religious beliefs, hoping to gain their trust. The villagers seem satisfied with your answers, and they invite you to stay in their village. You're grateful for their hospitality, but you're also aware that you need to prove yourself. You need to show them that you're a valuable member of the community, that you're willing to work hard, and that you're committed to their religious beliefs. The first thing you do is attend Mass at the church. The church is a simple stone building decorated with religious symbols and artwork. The service is conducted in Latin, which you don't understand, but you try to follow along as best you can. You kneel, pray, and sing hymns with the other villagers. As you participate in the service, you can't help but think about modern religious practices. You miss your freedom to choose your own religion, your freedom to worship in your own way, and your freedom to question religious dogma. You make a mental note to appreciate every single one of those things when you get back home. You also realize that religion played a much more important role in medieval society than it does today. The church was not just a place of worship. It was also a center of learning, a provider of social services, and a source of political power. The church controlled almost every aspect of people's lives, from their birth to their death. You're starting to understand why medieval people were so devout. Religion provided them with a sense of meaning, purpose, and community. It gave them hope in a world that was often harsh and unforgiving. You may not share their religious beliefs, but you can appreciate their faith. After the service, you introduce yourself to the village priest, a kind-looking man named Father Thomas. Father Thomas welcomes you to the village and offers you his assistance. He explains that the village is a close-knit community and that everyone is expected to contribute. Father Thomas asks you about your skills and abilities. You explain that you're a hard worker, that you're good with your hands, and that you're willing to do whatever is needed. Father Thomas is impressed with your attitude, and he offers you a job working on the church farm. You gratefully accept the job, knowing that it's a good way to earn the trust of the villagers. You start working on the farm the next day, tending to the crops, caring for the animals, and helping with other tasks. You work hard, and you quickly earn a reputation as a reliable and diligent worker. As you work on the farm, you learn more about the religious beliefs and practices of the villagers. You discover that they're deeply superstitious, that they believe in miracles, and that they fear the wrath of God. They're constantly praying, making offerings, and performing rituals to appease the divine. You also learn that the church controls almost every aspect of their lives. The church dictates what they can eat, what they can wear, and what they can do on Sundays. The church also collects taxes, enforces laws, and punishes those who violate religious rules. You're starting to feel like you're living in a theocracy, a society ruled by religious leaders. You're not sure if you like it. You miss your freedom to make your own choices, your freedom to express your own opinions, and your freedom to live your life as you see fit. You also realize that the church is not always a force for good. The church can be corrupt, oppressive, and intolerant. The church can use its power to exploit the poor, persecute dissenters, and wage wars in the name of God. You're starting to see the dark side of religion, the side that is often hidden behind a facade of piety and virtue. You're starting to question your own religious beliefs, to wonder if religion is really a force for good in the world. As you struggle with these questions, you continue to work on the church farm, trying to earn the trust of the villagers. You attend Mass every Sunday, you participate in religious rituals, and you try to conform to their religious beliefs. You're starting to feel like you're living a double life, pretending to be someone you're not. You're also starting to feel isolated and alone. You miss your friends, your family, and your modern way of life. You miss your freedom, your independence, and your ability to think for yourself. You're starting to think that you'll never be able to fit in this village, that you'll always be an outsider. One day, as you're working in the fields, you meet a young woman named Ilara. Ilara is a kind, intelligent, and independent woman who shares your doubts about the church. She tells you that she's also struggling to fit in, that she feels like an outsider in this village. You and Ilara become friends, and you start to share your thoughts and feelings with each other. You discover that you have a lot in common, that you both value freedom, independence, and critical thinking. You realize that you're not alone, that there are others who share your doubts and questions. You and Ilara decide to start a secret society, a group of people who meet in secret to discuss their doubts about the church and their hopes for a better world. You invite other like-minded people to join your society, and soon you have a small but dedicated group of followers. You meet in secret, in the woods, under the cover of darkness. You discuss your doubts about the church, your hopes for a better world, and your plans for the future. You're starting to feel like you're making a difference, that you're creating a community of like-minded people who can support each other. You're also starting to feel like you're taking a risk. You know that if the church discovers your secret society, you could be punished severely. You could be excommunicated, imprisoned, or even executed. But you're willing to take the risk because you believe that what you're doing is right. You're starting to feel like you're living a life of purpose, a life of meaning, a life of faith. You're not just surviving in the dark ages, you're fighting for a better world. You're starting to think that you might actually be able to make a difference. Okay, you've found a new village, made some friends, and even started a secret society. But don't get too comfortable. In the Dark Ages, your social standing is determined by the feudal system, a rigid hierarchy that dictates your rights, your responsibilities, and your place in the world. Get ready to learn your place in the pecking order, from lords and ladies to peasants and serfs, and realize that upward mobility is mostly a fairy tale. As you settle into your new life in the village, you begin to understand the intricacies of the feudal system. You learn that the village is part of a larger fiefdom, ruled by a local lord. The lord owns all the land, and the villagers are his tenants. They're required to work the land, pay taxes, and provide military service to the lord in exchange for his protection. You also learn that the feudal system is based on a strict hierarchy. At the top are the lords and ladies, who own the land and control the resources. Below them are the knights, who provide military service to the lords. Below the knights are the free men, who own their own land and are free to move about as they please. And at the bottom are the serfs, who are bound to the land and are not allowed to leave without the lord's permission. You realize that you're a serf, that you're tied to the land and subject to the lord's authority. You're not happy about this, but you know that there's nothing you can do about it. You're stuck in this system, and you have to make the best of it. You also learn that the feudal system is not just a social and economic system, it's also a political system. The lords have the power to make laws, enforce justice, and wage wars. They're essentially mini-kings in their own fiefdoms. You're starting to feel like you're living in a dictatorship. a society ruled by a small elite. You miss your democracy, your freedom to vote, and your right to participate in the political process. You make a mental note to appreciate every single one of those things when you get back home. You also realize that the feudal system is based on inequality. The lords and ladies live in luxury, while the serfs struggle to survive. The lords have all the power, while the serfs have none. You're starting to feel like you're living in an unjust society, a society where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. You're starting to question the fairness of the feudal system, to wonder if there's a better way to organize society. You're starting to think about revolution, about overthrowing the lords and establishing a more egalitarian system. But you know that it's a dangerous idea. If you're caught plotting against the lords, you could be executed. As you struggle with these questions, you continue to work on the church farm, trying to earn a living and support your family. You work hard, but you're barely able to make ends meet. The taxes are high, the crops are often poor, and the lords are always demanding more. You're starting to feel like you're trapped in a cycle of poverty, a cycle that you can't escape. You're starting to lose hope, to wonder if you'll ever be able to improve your situation. You're starting to think that the feudal system is designed to keep the serfs down, to prevent them from rising above their station. You also realize that the feudal system is based on tradition. The lords claim that they have a divine right to rule, that they're descended from noble ancestors, and that they're entitled to their privileges. They use tradition to justify their power, to maintain their control over the serfs. You're starting to question the validity of tradition, to wonder if it's really a good reason to maintain an unjust system. You're starting to think that tradition is just a way for the powerful to protect their own interests, to prevent change and progress. As you struggle with these questions, you continue to meet with your secret society, discussing your doubts about the feudal system and your hopes for a better world. You're starting to develop a revolutionary ideology, a set of ideas that challenge the foundations of the feudal system. You believe that all people are created equal, that they're entitled to certain inalienable rights, and that they have the right to overthrow unjust governments. You believe that the feudal system is unjust, that it's based on inequality and oppression, and that it needs to be abolished. You're starting to plan a revolution, to organize the serfs and overthrow the lords. You know that it's a dangerous plan, but you believe that it's necessary. You believe that the only way to create a better world is to fight for it. You're also aware that the odds are stacked against you. The lords have all the power, all the resources, and all the weapons. The serfs are poor, unorganized, and unarmed. You're facing a formidable enemy, and you're not sure if you can win, but you're not willing to give up. You believe that the serfs have the power to change their own destiny, to create a better world for themselves and their children. You're willing to risk everything to achieve your goals. You start to spread your revolutionary ideology among the serfs, to recruit them to your cause. You tell them about your vision of a better world, a world where all people are equal, where everyone has the opportunity to succeed, and where justice prevails. You're surprised by the response. Many of the serfs are eager to join your cause. They're tired of being oppressed, tired of being exploited, and tired of being treated like second-class citizens. They're ready to fight for their freedom. You start to organize the serfs into a secret army, to train them in the art of warfare, and to prepare them for the coming revolution. You know that it's a long and difficult process, but you're determined to succeed. You believe that the future of the world depends on it. You're starting to feel like you're living a life of purpose, a life of meaning, a life of revolution. You're not just surviving in the dark ages, you're fighting to change it. You're starting to think that you might actually be able to make a difference. Okay, you're plotting a revolution against the feudal system. Things are getting intense. But before you can overthrow the lords and establish a new world order, you have to survive the night. And in the dark ages, Nightfall is not just a time for rest and relaxation. It's a time of fear, darkness, and lurking dangers. Get ready to scramble to finish your chores before sunset. Then huddle by a smoky fire as wolves howl, and the village storyteller spins tales of monsters. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the village, you feel a sense of urgency. You know that you need to finish your chores before darkness falls, before the dangers of the night emerge. You hurry to gather firewood, feed the animals, and secure your hut against intruders. You also notice that the other villagers are doing the same. They're rushing to complete their tasks, their faces etched with worry. They know that the night is a time of vulnerability, a time when anything can happen. You finish your chores just as the last rays of sunlight disappear below the horizon. The village is plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the flickering flames of the hearth fires. You huddle inside your hut with your family, feeling a sense of unease. You know that the night is a time when wolves roam the woods, preying on livestock and unwary travelers. You can hear their howls in the distance, sending shivers down your spine. You also know that the night is a time when bandits raid villages, stealing food, valuables, and even people. You're afraid that your village will be next. You try to distract yourself from your fears by listening to the village storyteller, an old man named Silas. Silas is a master of his craft, able to weave tales of heroes, monsters, and magic that captivate his audience. He sits by the fire, his face illuminated by the flames, and begins to tell a story about a brave knight who slays a dragon. As you listen to Silas's story, you can't help but think about the monsters that lurk in the darkness, both real and imagined. You know that there are real dangers in the world like wolves and bandits, but you also know that there are imagined dangers like demons and witches. You're starting to understand why medieval people were so superstitious. They believed that the night was a time when evil spirits roamed the earth, seeking to harm the living. They used charms, spells, and other rituals to protect themselves from these spirits. You may not believe in demons and witches, but you can understand why people did in the Dark Ages. The night was a time of fear and uncertainty, a time when anything could happen. People needed something to believe in, something to give them hope, something to protect them from the darkness. As Silas's story comes to an end, you feel a sense of relief. The story has distracted you from your fears, at least for a little while. You thank Silas for his tale, and he smiles. "The night is always darkest before the dawn," he says. You take his words to heart, hoping that they're true. You know that the night will be long and difficult, but you also know that the sun will eventually rise again. You just have to survive until then. You settle in for the night, trying to get some sleep. You lie on your straw mattress listening to the sounds of the night. You can hear the wind howling, the wolves howling, and the owls hooting. You can also hear the sounds of your family breathing, snoring, and shifting in their sleep. You try to relax, but it's difficult. You're constantly on edge, waiting for something to happen. You're afraid that the wolves will attack, that the bandits will raid, or that the demons will come for you. You toss and turn, unable to find a comfortable position. You're too hot, too cold, too itchy, and too scared. You're starting to think that you'll never get any sleep. Finally, after what seems like an eternity, you drift off to sleep. You dream of wolves, bandits, and demons. You wake up several times during the night, startled by noises and nightmares. As the first rays of sunlight begin to peek through the cracks in your hut, you feel a sense of relief. The night is finally over. You've survived another night in the Dark Ages. You get out of bed, feeling tired and groggy. You stretch your muscles, trying to shake off the stiffness. You look around the hut, making sure that everything is in order. You notice that your family is still asleep. They're exhausted from working hard all day, and they need their rest. You decide to let them sleep a little longer. You step outside the hut, taking a deep breath of the fresh morning air. The village is slowly coming to life. People are starting to stir, to light their fires, and to prepare for the day ahead. You smile, feeling a sense of gratitude. You're alive, you're healthy, and you're ready to face whatever challenges the day may bring. You're a survivor, and you're not going to let the darkness defeat you. You start to prepare breakfast, gathering firewood, fetching water, and grinding grain. You work quickly and efficiently, knowing that you have a lot to do today. You need to tend to the crops, care for the animals, and prepare for the coming revolution. As you work, you can't help but think about the people who didn't survive the night. You know that there are many people who died from disease, starvation, or violence. You're grateful to be alive, and you're determined to make the most of your life. You also realize that the night is not just a time of fear and darkness. It's also a time of mystery and wonder. The night is a time when the stars shine brightly, when the moon illuminates the landscape, and when the imagination runs wild. You're starting to appreciate the beauty of the night, the beauty that is often hidden behind the fear and the darkness. You're starting to see the dark ages in a new light, a light that is both terrifying and enchanting. Okay, you've survived the night, but the dark ages have more horrors in store than just wolves and bandits. Let's talk about the plague and other perils that could wipe out entire villages in a matter of weeks. Imagine a mysterious sickness sweeping through nearby towns, and suddenly every cough and rat seems like a death sentence. Get ready to face the grim reality of disease, famine, and constant threat of mortality. As you go about your daily routine, you start to hear rumors of a mysterious sickness spreading through nearby towns. People are dying in droves, their bodies covered in black boils. The sickness is spreading quickly and no one knows how to stop it. You're terrified. You know that the plague is a deadly disease and that it could wipe out your entire village. You've heard stories of villages being abandoned, their inhabitants left to rot in their homes. You don't want that to happen to your village. You start to take precautions. You avoid contact with people from other towns. You wash your hands frequently, and you pray to God for protection. You also start to stockpile food and water in case the village is quarantined. You notice that the other villagers are doing the same. They're avoiding contact with outsiders. They're praying to God, and they're stockpiling supplies. The village is filled with fear and anxiety. As the days go by, the rumors of the plague become more frequent and more alarming. You hear that entire families have died, that doctors are helpless, and that the end is near. You're starting to lose hope. One day, you wake up feeling sick. You have a fever, a headache, and a cough. You're terrified that you have the plague. You tell your family that you're feeling ill, and they immediately isolate you in a separate room. You lie in bed, feeling miserable. You're sweating, shivering, and coughing. You're afraid that you're going to die. You pray to God for mercy, begging Him to spare your life. Your family takes care of you as best they can. They bring you food and water. They change your bedding, and they pray for you. But they're also afraid of catching the plague, so they keep their distance. As the days go by, your condition worsens. Your fever rises, your headache intensifies, and your cough becomes more violent. You start to develop black boils on your skin, the telltale sign of the plague. You know that you're going to die. You're resigned to your fate. You say goodbye to your family, telling them that you love them and that you'll see them in heaven. You close your eyes and wait for death to come. You drift in and out of consciousness, having vivid dreams and hallucinations. You see angels, demons, and long-dead relatives. Finally, after what seems like an eternity, you die. Your family mourns your death, but they're also relieved that you're no longer suffering. They bury you quickly, before your body can spread the plague to others. Your death is a tragedy, but it's also a reality of life in the Dark Ages. Disease is rampant. and death is always lurking around the corner. People die from the plague, from famine, from war, and from countless other causes. You're just one of millions of people who died in the Dark Ages. Your life was short, but it was also meaningful. You lived, you loved, and you fought for a better world. Your memory will live on, even after you're gone. But let's rewind a bit. What if you didn't die? What if you somehow managed to survive the plague? What would your life be like? Let's say that you have a mild case of the plague, and that you're able to recover after a few weeks. You're weak and scarred, but you're alive. You're one of the lucky ones. You return to your village, but you find that it's been decimated by the plague. Many of your friends and family members have died. The village is a shadow of its former self. You're heartbroken by the loss, but you're also determined to rebuild your life. You start to work hard, helping to rebuild the village, to care for the survivors, and to prevent the plague from spreading again. You learn a lot about disease, about hygiene, and about medicine. You realize that the plague is not just a random act of God. It's also a result of poor sanitation, malnutrition, and ignorance. You decide to dedicate your life to improving the health and well-being of your community. You start to teach people about hygiene, about nutrition, and about medicine. You encourage them to wash their hands, to eat healthy foods, and to seek medical attention when they're sick. You also start to experiment with herbal remedies, trying to find cures for common diseases. You become a healer, a respected member of the community. People come to you for help, and you do your best to treat their illnesses. You're not always successful, but you're always compassionate. You also continue to fight for social justice. You believe that poverty, inequality, and oppression are major causes of disease. You work to improve the living conditions of the poor, to promote equality, and to fight against injustice. You become a leader, a voice for the voiceless. People listen to you, and they respect your opinions. You're able to make a difference in the lives of others. You live a long and fulfilling life, surrounded by friends, family, and admirers. You die peacefully in your sleep, knowing that you've made the world a better place. Your life is a testament to the power of resilience, compassion, and determination. You survived the plague, and you used your experience to help others. You're a hero, a saint, and an inspiration. Okay, you've faced death and maybe survived. Now let's talk about love, marriage, and family life in the Dark Ages. Forget your dating apps and your rom-com fantasies. In this era, courtship is awkward, marriages are arranged, and family life means sharing a one-room hut with your entire extended family. Get ready to navigate the complexities of medieval relationships, where love is often secondary to survival and social obligation. As you settle into your new life in the village, you start to notice the social dynamics between men and women. You realize that courtship is a formal and often awkward process, governed by strict rules and customs. You see young men and women exchanging glances, shyly flirting, and occasionally holding hands. But there's no such thing as casual dating. Courtship is a serious business, with the goal of marriage in mind. You also learn that marriages are often arranged by the parents, with little or no input from the bride and groom. The parents consider factors such as social status, wealth, and family connections when choosing a spouse for their child. Love is rarely a factor. You're shocked by this practice. You believe that people should be free to choose their own partners, based on love and attraction. You can't imagine being forced to marry someone you don't love. You also realize that family life is very different in the Dark Ages than it is today. Families are large, often consisting of several generations, living under one roof. The one-room hut is crowded, noisy, and lacks privacy. You see families working together, sharing meals, and supporting each other. But you also see families arguing, fighting, and struggling to survive. Life is hard, and families often face difficult challenges. You're starting to feel lonely. You miss your friends, your family, and your modern relationships. You miss the freedom to date, to choose your own partner, and to live your own life. You decide that you want to find love, to experience the joys of romance and companionship. But you know that it won't be easy. You're a newcomer to the village, and you don't have any social connections. You're also not wealthy, and you don't have a family to arrange a marriage for you. You start to attend social gatherings, hoping to meet someone special. You go to dances, festivals, and church services. You try to be friendly, to make conversation, and to show people that you're a good person. You meet several young women, but none of them seem like the right fit. Some of them are already betrothed. Others are not interested in you, and still, others are simply not compatible with your personality. You're starting to get discouraged. You're wondering if you'll ever find love in the dark ages. You're starting to think that you're destined to be alone. One day, you meet a young woman named Isolde. Isolde is a kind, intelligent, and beautiful woman who shares your values and interests. You're immediately drawn to her, and you feel a strong connection. Isolde is also interested in you. She's impressed by your intelligence, your kindness, and your sense of humor. She enjoys spending time with you, and she feels comfortable, sharing her thoughts and feelings with you. You and Isolde start to spend more time together. You go for walks in the woods, you share meals together, and you talk for hours about your hopes and dreams. You're falling in love. You know that you want to marry Isolde, to spend the rest of your life with her. But you also know that it won't be easy. Her parents are wealthy and influential, and they want her to marry someone of equal status. You decide to talk to Isolde's parents, to ask for their blessing. You dress in your best clothes, you practice your speech, and you try to be as respectful as possible. Isolde's parents are polite, but they're also skeptical. They don't think that you're good enough for their daughter. They tell you that you're not wealthy enough, that you don't have a family name, and that you're not from the village. You're disappointed, but you don't give up. You tell Isolde's parents that you love her, that you'll do anything to make her happy, and that you'll work hard to provide for her. You ask them to give you a chance. Isolde's parents are touched by your sincerity. They agree to give you a chance, but they set a condition. You have to prove yourself worthy of their daughter. You have to earn their respect. You accept the challenge. You work hard, you save money, and you try to impress Isolde's parents. You help them with their chores. You give them gifts, and you show them that you're a good person. After several months, Isolde's parents are finally convinced. They see that you're a good man, that you love their daughter, and that you're willing to work hard to provide for her. They give you their blessing. You're overjoyed. You ask Isolde to marry you, and she says yes. You plan a wedding, inviting all your friends and family. You celebrate your love, your happiness, and your future together. You get married in the village church, surrounded by your loved ones. You exchange vows, promising to love and cherish each other for the rest of your lives. You're filled with joy, gratitude, and hope. You start your new life together, building a home, raising a family, and supporting each other through thick and thin. You face many challenges, but you always overcome them together. You're a strong, loving, and resilient couple. You live a long and fulfilling life, surrounded by your children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. You die peacefully in each other's arms, knowing that you've lived a life of love, happiness, and purpose. Your love story is a testament to the power of human connection, the importance of family, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. You found love in the dark ages, and you created a life of beauty, joy, and meaning. Okay, you've found love and built a family, but don't think you're safe just yet. In the dark ages, war, raiders, and random violence are a constant threat. Imagine being jolted awake by the sound of alarm bells, realizing that bandits are attacking your village, or that the Lord is conscripting men for a war. Get ready to face the brutal reality that peace is always fragile and danger can strike at any moment. As you settle into your married life, you become aware of the ever-present threat of violence. You hear stories of wars between lords, of raids by bandits, and of feuds between families. You know that your village is not immune to these dangers. You start to take precautions. You learn how to use a sword and shield. You practice fighting with your neighbors, and you keep a close watch on the surrounding countryside. You also start to stockpile food and water in case the village is attacked. You notice that the other villagers are doing the same. They're preparing for war. They're training to fight, and they're stocking up on supplies. The village is filled with a sense of tension and unease. One day you hear the sound of alarm bells ringing. You rush outside, and you see that the village is under attack. Bandits are raiding the village, stealing food, valuables, and livestock. You grab your sword and shield, and you join the other villagers in defending your home. You fight bravely, protecting your family, your neighbors, and your community. You're terrified, but you're also determined to survive. The battle is fierce and chaotic. You see people being killed, wounded, and captured. You're forced to make difficult choices, to risk your life, and to witness terrible things. You fight for hours until finally the bandits are driven off. The village is saved, but it's been badly damaged. Many people have been killed, wounded, or captured. The village is filled with grief and despair. You help to care for the wounded, to bury the dead, and to rebuild the village. You're exhausted, but you're also grateful to be alive. You've survived a violent attack, and you're stronger than ever. You realize that war is a terrible thing, that it causes suffering, death, and destruction. You also realize that war is sometimes necessary, that it's sometimes the only way to defend your home, your family, and your freedom. You're starting to develop a more nuanced view of violence, to understand that it's not always evil, that it can sometimes be used for good. You're also starting to question the morality of war, to wonder if there's a better way to resolve conflicts. As you rebuild your village, you hear rumors of a war between your lord and a neighboring lord. The war is over a disputed territory, and it's threatening to engulf the entire region. You know that you'll be called upon to fight in this war. You're a skilled warrior, and you have a duty to defend your lord, but you're also reluctant to fight. You've seen the horrors of war, and you don't want to experience them again. You talk to your wife, Isolde, about your dilemma. She understands your feelings, but she also reminds you of your duty. She tells you that you have to do what's right, even if it's difficult. You decide to join the war, to fight for your lord, your village, and your family. You say goodbye to Isolde, promising to return home safely. You're filled with fear, but you're also determined to be brave. You join the Lord's army, and you march to the battlefield. You see thousands of soldiers, all armed and ready to fight. You're impressed by the size and strength of the army, but you're also intimidated by the prospect of facing such a large force. The battle is long and bloody. You fight bravely, killing many enemies, but you also see many of your comrades being killed. You're wounded several times, but you keep fighting. Finally, after hours of fighting, your army wins the battle. The enemy is defeated, and the war is over. You're relieved, but you're also saddened by the loss of life. You return home to your village, feeling exhausted and traumatized. You're greeted by Isolde, who's overjoyed to see you. You embrace her, feeling grateful to be alive. You spend the next few weeks recovering from your wounds, both physical and emotional. You talk to Isolde about your experiences in the war, and she helps you to process your trauma. You realize that war has changed you, that it's made you more cynical, more cautious, and more aware of the fragility of life. You also realize that war has made you more appreciative of peace, more grateful for your family, and more committed to building a better world. You decide to dedicate your life to promoting peace, to preventing war, and to helping those who have been affected by violence. You become a peacemaker, a healer, and a voice for the voiceless. You work to resolve conflicts peacefully, to mediate disputes, and to promote understanding between different groups. You also work to care for the wounded, to comfort the grieving, and to rebuild communities that have been destroyed by war. You become a respected member of the community, a leader, and an inspiration. People look up to you and they admire your courage, your compassion, and your commitment to peace. You live a long and fulfilling life, surrounded by your loved ones. You die peacefully in your sleep, knowing that you've made the world a better place. Your life is a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of peace, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. You faced war, violence, and trauma, but you never gave up hope. You dedicated your life to building a better world, and you succeeded. Okay, you've survived war, found peace, and built a legacy. But now it's time for the final test, the longest night. Imagine trying to sleep, haunted by hunger, fear, and the realization that you probably wouldn't last another day in this brutal, fascinating world. Get ready to confront the ultimate challenge, accepting the harsh realities of the Dark Ages, and finding a way to make peace with your own mortality. As the sun sets on your final day in the Dark Ages, you feel a sense of exhaustion, both physical and emotional. You've faced countless challenges. You've witnessed terrible things, and you've struggled to survive in a world that is often harsh and unforgiving. You're also filled with a sense of gratitude. You've found love, built a family, and made a difference in the lives of others. You've learned valuable lessons about resilience, compassion, and the importance of peace. You settle in for the night, knowing that it will be a long and difficult one. You're haunted by memories of the past, by fears of the future, and by the realization that your time in this world is limited. You lie on your straw mattress, listening to the sounds of the night. You can hear the wind howling, the wolves howling, and the owls hooting. You can also hear the sounds of your family breathing, snoring, and shifting in their sleep. You try to relax, but it's difficult. You're constantly on edge, waiting for something to happen. You're afraid that the bandits will return, that the plague will strike again, or that the war will resume. You're also haunted by the faces of those who have died, by the memories of their suffering, and by the knowledge that you'll eventually join them in the grave. You're starting to feel overwhelmed by the weight of mortality. You try to distract yourself from your fears by thinking about your loved ones. You think about Isolde, your wife, your soulmate, your partner in life. You think about your children, your grandchildren, and your great-grandchildren. You're filled with love, pride, and gratitude. You realize that your family is your legacy, that they're the ones who will carry on your memory, your values, and your dreams. You're comforted by this thought, knowing that you'll live on, through them, even after you're gone. You also think about the good deeds you've done, the lives you've touched, and the difference you've made in the world. You're proud of your accomplishments, knowing that you've made the world a better place. You realize that your life has had meaning, that you've lived a life of purpose, and that you've left a positive impact on the world. You're comforted by this thought, knowing that your life has not been in vain. As the night wears on, you start to feel a sense of peace. You're no longer afraid of death, no longer haunted by the past, and no longer worried about the future. You're simply grateful for the present moment, for the love of your family, and for the beauty of the world around you. You close your eyes and drift off to sleep, feeling content, fulfilled, and at peace. You dream of a better world, a world where there's no more war, no more suffering, and no more death. You wake up feeling refreshed, renewed, and ready to face whatever the future may hold. You realize that you've survived the longest night, that you've conquered your fears, and that you've made peace with your own mortality. You're a survivor, a warrior, and a beacon of hope. You step outside your hut, taking a deep breath of the fresh morning air. The sun is rising, casting a golden glow across the village. The birds are singing, the children are laughing, and the world is filled with beauty and promise. You smile, feeling grateful to be alive. You're ready to face whatever challenges the day may bring, knowing that you have the strength, the courage, and the love to overcome them. You're a survivor of the dark ages, and you're ready to embrace the future. Now let's wind down. The fire crackles softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls of your humble hut. The day's labors are done, and a quiet peace settles over the village. The wind whispers through the trees, carrying with it the scent of wood smoke and earth. You lie back on your straw-filled mattress, the rough fabric a familiar comfort against your skin. The weight of the day slowly lifts, replaced by a gentle weariness that invites sleep. You close your eyes, and the images of the day begin to fade. The faces of your loved ones, the sounds of the village, the feel of the earth beneath your feet, all slowly dissolving into the soft darkness behind your eyelids. There is no fear, no worry, only a quiet acceptance of the moment. The world outside may be harsh and unforgiving, but here, in this small space, you are safe, you are loved, and you are at peace. Breathe deeply, and let the darkness embrace you. Let the sounds of the night lull you into a deep and restful sleep. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but for now, there is only the quiet stillness of the night. Let go of your thoughts, your worries, and your fears. Surrender to the darkness, and allow yourself to drift away into the realm of dreams.